Ukraine is facing its most perilous moment. Its most important lifeline has been severed. Donald Trump's decisive cut of military aid threatens to unravel Ukraine's fight against Russia. This story explains the weapons the US was providing Kiev and how, without them, Ukraine has been left in the cold.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President.
If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days.
What do you need to see from President Zelensky to restart these negotiations?
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us.
The US has slammed the brakes on military aid, cutting off the weapons, intelligence and technology that have kept Kyiv in the fight. With Russian forces ramping up their offensive, Ukraine's ability to hold the line is in jeopardy. The equation on the battlefield has changed overnight, and Kyiv is running out of time. The absence of US arms means no Patriot missile batteries, leaving cities vulnerable to Russian airstrikes. No more ATACMS, weakening Ukraine's ability to strike deep behind enemy lines. No additional HIMARS rockets that will cripple fighting capabilities of the Ukrainian troops on the front lines. No replenishment of javelins and stingers that are key to stopping Russian tanks and aircraft. Washington had delivered millions of artillery shells to Ukraine. That flow is now frozen, while Moscow's bombardment shows no signs of stopping. The crisis goes beyond missing firepower. Ukraine has relied on US intelligence to track Russian movements, missile launches and air threats. That lifeline also could now be cut off, leaving Kyiv blind on the battlefield. Even worse, Starlink, Ukraine's battlefield communication backbone, could be pulled out. Without it, frontline troops will struggle to coordinate, leaving them vulnerable to Russian advances. Europe is scrambling for a response, saying Washington did not consult NATO allies before making the call.
It may seem trivial, but this decision is of great political importance. It was taken without any information or consultation, neither with NATO allies.
I'm a little bit concerned, but I would imagine this is probably part of this grand strategy that the White House has chosen, which is to see if this course of action can lead to peace, effectively appeasing Russia and putting some pressure on Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Russia is calling the aid freeze the best step towards peace as its forces escalate attacks on Ukraine's power grids and cities. The reality is grim. Without US backing, Ukraine is running on borrowed time. Europe is scrambling to fill the gap, but it may already be too late. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Bishop Garrison is a former senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense and current senior fellow at National Security Institute. He's also a defense and security expert. He's now joining us live on this broadcast from Virginia. Mr. Bishop, thank you very much for making time for us and welcome to the program. This spat at the White House, it seems like it's escalating by the day. What will salvage the relationship between America and Ukraine now that NATO and European leaders are in the fold?
Well, thank you for having me, first and foremost. This is a critical stage right now in the Russian-Ukrainian war. Critical stage, as you mentioned, for U.S.-Ukraine relations. The White House is doing its absolute best to bring about peace here, to find some way forward in which President Trump is able to help negotiate a deal between the Ukrainians and the Russians to to bring about a ceasefire and then ultimately an end to this war. So I think some of the bombast that you saw within the Oval Office between President Zelensky and President Trump plays into a part of that. President Trump wants him to come to the negotiating table along with Vladimir Putin in an effort to bring about some type of end to this war. Now, the issue in the way that we've seen these tactics play out and the way we've seen some of this discourse play is that it's creating some level of isolation for the United States in terms of the ideology and political process here, because Europe and NATO allies don't necessarily agree right now with the approach. Everyone's kind of in a wait and see moment. They want to see more of what the White House is going to say here. They want to hear more from Zelensky to understand ultimately what the goals are for Ukraine and how they believe they can bring about an end to this conflict.
Mr. Garrison, do you really think that Ukraine has been left in the cold because the U.S. is deciding to pull out its military aid to the country? Can Europe or NATO or any other country assist or bridge the gap? Excuse me for that.
Well, I think what you did see is unanimous support from the EU and from NATO countries for Ukraine in the face of the discourse from the White House. So as early as for us here in the U.S. this morning, we saw reports that an additional $150 billion from Europe and NATO allies were being pushed towards Ukraine. And they're looking at estimates as much potentially as $800 billion that could be in the process of being transferred as in support of this war. Now, that's not to say in the short term that they won't feel the effects of any type of pullback of support in terms of weapons, ammunition, and resources, money from the United States right now. But that also remains to be seen. The U.S. Congress plays a very strong role in this. Those funds were appropriated through legislation, through U.S. law. So the White House's efforts to pull back on them are potentially going to be met by some very serious questions from senior Senate officials, from senior elected officials here within the United States.
All right, I've been talking to a defense and security expert. His name is Bishop Garrison. Mr. Garrison, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.